Hello, Mr. Precious Omuku. Thank you very much for joining us today. Apologies to all our viewers. We've had a few difficulties with the technology, but we really thank Mr. Precious for all the effort he has put in to connect. So thank you very much. We're talking to Mr. Precious Omuku today, Nigerian composer.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
Okay. So we're just going to dive right in. Can you tell us something about your background before we go into the other subjects that we want to discuss today? Just introduce yourself to us.
Okay. Dr. Precious Omuku. I teach music in the Department of Music, University of Port Harcourt. And I write music, mostly choral music, even though most often than not, I delve into a little bit of secular and contemporary music, but my area most of the time is church music.
Okay. If we focus on you as a composer, you say you write music. When did you start composing, and did you always want to be a composer, or how did it happen?
I didn't set out to be a composer. By the way, I grew up, found myself in the choir because my mother and my grandmother were in the choir. So I had no choice but to be in the choir. But after secondary school and having gained experience in singing and all that, I didn't think it was necessary to go study music. So I went up to do a degree in business administration. But years after graduation, precisely 11 years after graduation, my quest and my thirst for music had grown so big. So I found myself writing my own simple tunes, and my church choir would perform them. And I found that quite exciting. So one day I decided that, hey, why not take a degree in music? So that was how I found myself back to the university to take a first, second, and third degree in music. So I teach music now.
Okay, that's a very interesting history. Thank you very much. I noticed that you said you didn't have a choice but to join the choir. What does that mean?
Yeah, because my parents were in the choir, and I mean, I had to follow them. No one would leave me alone at home. So okay. it was a family thing. We were just in the choir.
Okay.
You just have to be in the choir.
Right. So as a composer and as a singer, because you also sing, you perform your own work. And I want to play Nimechu, which is one of your compositions that you performed for us at Composers in Conference, which is an event we held in Abuja, Nigeria in 2017. So I'll just play this for our audience, and then we will.
Music in 1983. And I had to do a remix of it for church. It was actually written as a folklore before what it is now. I hope I remember his faithfulness, for Jehovah is King. Okay.
So
So that was Nimechu by Precious Omuku. I must say that was a beautiful performance, and thank you very much for performing for us at that event. As you would remember, I was part of the people who organized Composers in Conference in Abuja. Can I ask, what kind of training did you undertake or did you receive to be able to perform the way you do? I mean, anybody watching that performance, and especially listening to the last notes, all of the performance, but especially that last note that you stretched and carried on, and the key, the pitch. I'm not a musician, but that note is quite high as far as I'm concerned for a man, and how long you were able to drag it on for, and the beautiful, exquisite performance that you gave that day and that you give every time you perform. What kind of training? Can you tell us if there was any kind of training, or I mean, how did this come about?
First of all, the tenor voice relishes in the high notes. If you're able to, hit those notes and create that beautiful sound that wows your audience, then you have got it. But about the training, well, like I said, growing up in the choir, I had a lot of mentors that I looked up to. I wanted to be like them.
Okay.
And whilst I was struggling with my education, I had a part of me that was devoted to learning to sing. I never learned it because I wanted to teach or study music, but I wanted to sing. Okay. So I had a lot of people in the choir that I wanted to be like.
No,
But we
okay.
got to a point where I saw that I was a bit around them and somehow not being modest, I was sounding better than them. So I now looked up to Luciano Pavarotti, who
Ah,
truly inspired me.
okay.
He inspired me. So I had a lot of his recordings, and I would always want to run the scales with him. I would like to hit any pitch he did, and
Okay.
that worked for me. Yeah.
All right. Okay. All right. I've also noticed when we talk about your singing, you support, should I say support or collaborate with African composers, so people like yourself. And one of the composers that you have collaborated with recently is someone called Dotun Adelekan. I don't mean to skip right into another performance of yours, but I think it's better to just do it because we have quite a few topics to discuss, in addition to what we've already covered. So we are going to listen now to Arise, O God, which was composed by Mr. Dotun Adelekan, also from Nigeria. So we'll play this now for the audience, and then we'll talk more about
Yeah.
well,
Welcome back.
that is a note and a half. So we've just listened to Arise, O God. Again, I'm not an expert in these things, but I would say that was an absolutely brilliant performance from my perspective. And this is just one of several collaborations between you and Mr. Dotun. The other one is Good Tidings. The video is available online for anybody who is interested. Can you tell us how this collaboration came about?
Dr. Adelekon is an engineer by profession, but he is an embodiment of music. His musicality is out of this world. If you listen to what he writes, you probably think you're listening to a junior Handel, because his style, his his skill is liturgical, and his lyrical content depicts the church. So he has done a lot of oratorios. Rise of God is from his oratorio
The Redeemer?
Redeemer.
Yes.
Yes, and Redeemer has close to 2,000 songs. I'm not joking. He has Redeemer one, two, three, four, as in different books of the same work.
Okay.
They are prolific.
Okay.
So I have, he's been my friend from back in the days. He used to be the organist of my church, years back. So he's good. He's very good.
Okay. I was going to ask you about what kinds of works that you consider for performance, because obviously, I mean, we know that we have one African composer watching this video right now, watching us live, Mr. Michael Bakari, and there might be others who will watch it later. What kinds of works do you consider? Yes, he is. So we would, what kinds of works do you consider for performance, in case others are thinking of sending you their works to at least consider? We know that, you look at things that are out of this world, as you've said, high quality, by prolific and very, very good and experienced composers, talented and skilled. But can you just break it down? Give us a breakdown of what you will consider in case people want to reach out to you.
Oh, I do a lot of oratorios. I sing. I am basically a church man, if you like. So, but I delve mostly these days into secular because of the kind of work my ensemble performs.
Yes. You manage the Fuse ensemble in Port Harcourt, is that it? Yes. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so we branch into serious secular music. In fact, we're having our Valentine concert on the 16th of February after we did the Full Messiah last November. So I do any kind of music so far it appeals to me.
Okay, so you can be contacted because you do support and collaborate with composers. All right. Is there any particular African composer that you admire, and can you tell us why? That's just one, and why you admire them. It doesn't have to be one, but just think, is there any?
Yes, I admire quite a lot. Benafa Zitu, David. Zitu is a fine writer. He is gifted, and he brings to bear his musicianship into his writing, and it reflects on his persona. He writes not only for the church, he writes for the secular world, and that link, in the university we call it town and gown. Zitu has the capacity to fuse, music. I've done a lot of work with him, by the way, and I can proudly say he's my protege. But I admire his works, and of course, Bakari there watching us is also a fantastic composer. I have done his work that he presented to me last year. My students performed it at their last semester exams, and it was quite beautiful. He's very good, fantastic.
Okay. There is something you have mentioned a number of times, and I'm just wondering if there is any role, I suppose, for talent to play, because it seems as if some of the composers are talented and some are have gone through the process of getting trained and getting qualified. How do these two different aspects to an individual come together? You talked about Mr. Dotun being an engineer, but then being an exceptional, brilliant composer. You also started, was it business administration, and then you went on to become composer, a singer. You lead a choral group, you lecture. I mean, we're looking at talent now and training and marrying both of them, which one makes an exceptional composer? Do you need to have both? Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot. I know it's a difficult question and it's an age-old question, but feel free to give us your opinion.
Opinion is simple. It's like coming into the university to study music. I often tell my students, I say, if you do not have it in you, you could just get the degree and move on. But if you have if you have music in you, you will graduate, be a musician in the true sense of it. Now, talent has a lot to do with.
Can you get music in you? Because if you don't have it in you, that might put a student off or make them, feel down, cause them to probably give up on their journey. So how do you get it in you? How does this work?
It depends on your background. A lot of the great composers, the great singers, the great artists you find today started from the church. And I must say, the Orthodox Church has played great role in making the body of musicians today in Nigeria and Africa great and big. Your background plays a pivotal role in molding what you become. You may end up being an engineer, may end up being a medical practitioner, but if you have music in you, you will still retrace your step to where you belong. And that's exactly what I've done.
Okay.
So talent is everything.
Okay, well, speaking of, people going into music, becoming composers either through talent, training, or both, what do you think of the current music composition landscape across Africa today? Not looking at your students in particular, but especially since you are a lecturer and you work with different choral groups you perform, what do you think about the landscape today of music composition across Africa? Because I know you work beyond Nigeria, your country.
We are blessed. Africa is blessed. Let me not even go to Africa. Let me stay with Nigeria. The abundance of talents, the abundance of musicians, the abundance of writers in Nigeria, I can assure you, you have not covered a quarter in terms of, yeah, I'm serious. You have not covered a quarter. The abundance of people with the skill, with the ability to write and interpret music is out of this world. Nigeria, Africa has got it. The only challenge we've always had and still have is our ability to put it forward, to making sure that these things are performed for the world to see. Let me give you a typical example. Dr. Adelekon has written quite a number of works. But what I told him that, hey, all these things you have kept here would not be known except you give these books freely to choirs and schools to begin to sing, which we did. We went around choirs and schools in Nigeria to donate his books, his works, and today they are performing there. And these things encourage other people to begin to learn the art, to study the art of writing. So we have quite a pool of great writers and composers still on time.
Okay, yes, you said still, that word is critical, because if we listen again to the Nimechu video that we watched some minutes ago, you said you composed it in 1983, which is quite some time ago. But it's interesting to hear you sound so positive about composers across Africa and especially Nigeria, as you said, today. Because I'm wondering, how do you compare the composers of today with the composers of decades ago? For example, you said 1983 is potentially, about those who composed in the 70s and 60s. What are the differences?
No, when I wrote that, I was just a young man in secondary school. I wrote that. It was actually a folklore. Okay, yes, my school was going for a singing competition, and I heard the music. I heard it in my head, especially the refrain, the chorus, and it was ringing there. So I was in the boat going to my village. But you go to my village with the boat on the sea. So in that noise, in the melody of that noise, I heard the music, and I managed to scribble it down. Now, over time, I saw that because it's a folklore, it was not good. The lyrics didn't match for worship in church. So I had to rewrite what you now know for the church. Now, the same thing. A lot of people today decide what they write and how they write them. Those days, our founding fathers, wrote specifically. Unlike today, where the composer is both the lyricist and the composer. Those days, most of the composers did less work. They get their librettist to give them a libretto, and they only put the music down. But today, we do even much more in bringing music
Okay.
to the
Okay.
world.
All right. A number of topics have come up, even though we only have 2 minutes, and you've talked about how busy you are today. But I want to quickly mention categories and categorizing our music. You talked about Nimecho being a folklore, and I'm glad you brought that up. Across different parts of the world, outside of Africa, you know about the categories of music. You've got, the fugues, you've got the canons or the rounds, you have oratorios, symphonies. We have mainly, if you listen to Africans talk, from what I have discovered, folklore, African art music, choruses, popularly sung in churches. Do you know of a categorization system that exists? And if you're not aware of one or you don't think one exists, you think it is time for us to start to say, I know how to compose symphonies, fugues, and the like, and that works. However, these are our own categories. This is the standard and categorization. Or do you think that is not necessary because it's probably going to serve as a platform to introduce our kind of music to the world or to the world outside of Africa?
Africa has been seriously influenced by Baroque music. If you listen to a typical Nigerian or African composer, you will see elements of the Baroque style. And that's because a lot of our choir masters were admirers of the Baroque composers. So you find out that those of us that grew over time under them write like, the Handels, the Bach, and their likes. Okay? There has been a concerted effort among our composers these days to do more of.
Hello? Hello? Can you repeat? Hello? Just give us 1 minute, please, to sort out the network. We're about to round up the interview. Please give us a few more minutes to try see if he can reconnect. He just reconnected. Yes, he's back. Let's see if it works this time. Hello, sir. Thank you very much for coming back. Thank you. Sorry. Yes, you were talking about the Baroque style and how it has influenced a lot of composers and how they are now changing. What kind of transformation or change of direction is happening?
Yeah, what present day composers do churn out today is more of fusion music. See, the Baroque style has its roots that we have adapted and adopted for writing. So what we do now is to go back to our Africanness and take elements of Baroque, classical, medieval, and what have you, to in terms of quality. I don't know whether you're getting me.
We did not catch all of that, but I heard you talk about the fusion of music, Baroque, so classical. You talked about medieval, African styles as well. Is that not? I don't know if you can still hear me yourself. I do not think so. Okay, just give us one more minute. We will try to round up the interview. We might potentially get a write-up from Sir Precious, just as we did with Sam Yolson as well. And maybe we'll use text to round up the interview. So if we cannot get him back and have a clear stream and a clear video, we might go with that. Perhaps just a few lines to give us the answer to the last question in writing. So thank you very much for your patience. Okay. Thank you very much for rejoining us. So we did catch that last point that African music, African composers right now compose in a fusion style. However, because we're having challenges with the network connection, I will reach out to you to see if you can give us just a few lines, to repeat what you were saying in writing. But I want to thank you before, in case the network goes again, I want to really, really thank you for, joining us, for taking part in this interview. It's been splendid, interesting. There are so many topics that we can explore from everything you've said, but we want to keep the interview down to 30 minutes, as close to 30 minutes as possible. I really appreciate the time you've given us today out of your busy schedule. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to everyone who watched and followed us through on the interview. The video will be available online for anybody who would like to follow it up later on Facebook, and it's going to be uploaded to YouTube as well. So, Mr. Precious, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
Okay. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.